Hi, my name is Tiagi, and in this video, I'll be going over how to do hard SAT punctuation questions and some general tips on solving these problems. So to start, let's go over the 4 types of punctuation you will see on this SAT. So the first type is commas. And so with commas, how it works is commas, they list items, right? They denote non-essential clauses, right? So an example would be if we have a sentence and we have a comma here, comma here, period. What we're saying is that this clause here, clause is just a part of a sentence with a subject and a verb, or not even a subject and verb, it doesn't have to. But in this case, this is a non-essential clause because if we cross it off in the sentence would still read and work without it, so it's non-essential to the sentence. Commas also connect dependent plus independent clauses, and the example would be something like while, or like some kind of dependent uh, word. So while something, and then we would have the rest of our sentence, comma, in the independent clause here. And commas can connect independent clauses to independent clauses using a comma plus a fanboy or a conjunction. So fanboy is just for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and these are all conjunctions you can use to connect a independent clause to independent clause using a comma. And so you're not allowed to use a comma just to connect two independent clauses without a fanboy. So you can't just say independent clause, comma, independent clause. That's a comma splice because we're trying to connect two independent clauses with a comma. And just to go over what an independent clause is. An independent clause is a clause that has a subject and a verb and it can stand on its own. A dependent clause has a subject and a verb and it can't stand on its own. And you can tell if it stands on its own based on just reading it, saying, okay, this sounds like it could be a sentence. This doesn't sound like it could be a sentence. Next, semicolons. So semicolons connect two independent clauses together, right? And usually they're related, but on the SAT, they don't have to be related. They just have to connect two independent clauses. And semicolons can also, this is a harder way of using semicolons, but they can also separate list items, okay? Separate list items if commas in the list. So if there's commas in the list, then they can function like these commas and separate list items. Colons. So colons can come at the end of the independent clause, and what they do is they either uh, add explanations or they can add extra info. They can also start a list. So you could have a sentence, colon, and then you could start a list using that colon. And finally, dashes are pretty simple. Dashes, they just separate non-essential clauses on the SAT. That's all they do, non-essential clauses. Okay, so my 3 big tips for solving any hard SAT punctuation question is to first read the whole sentence, okay? I feel like a lot of times we don't read the whole sentence. We only look at the part around it, right? And we gotta get tripped up because the SAT knows you're not gonna be like really focused and reading the whole thing. So they try to trick you by including trap answers that only would work if you read that one part, not the whole sentence. So please read the whole sentence. You don't read the whole passage, just read the sentence, because a lot of times they might trip you up because that you didn't read the whole passage or the sentence. Next, identify the independent/dependent clauses. Well, my marker's kind of dead. Sorry, guys. So by identifying the independent and dependent clauses, what you do is you can differentiate now what you should use. Should you use a comma? Should you use a semicolon, colon, dash, etc.? And you can figure that out by identifying is it an independent or dependent or whatever clause. And finally, my last tip is if you can't figure it out, you could always try looking at the odd one out trick. Right? So you can see, okay, the answer choices we have a comma, we have a period, we have a dash, and we have nothing, right? You can say like, okay, well, A, C, and D, those are all for connecting dependent clauses. They can't connect to independent clauses, Meanwhile, a period, which is also another type of punctuation, connects two independent clauses, and so this is independent. These are all dependent clauses. Therefore, the answer should be B, based on the odd one out trick. And again, this doesn't always work, so only use this trick if you have no idea what the answer is, but sometimes it's helpful just to think about it in that way. Okay, let's try out some problems now. So again, these problems will be in the description below because they're kind of blurry on the camera. So just follow along on the slideshow below. Which one? We'll do this one first. Okay, so to serve local families during the Great Depression, innovative New York City librarian Pura Belpre offered storytelling both English and Spanish, an uncommon practice at the time celebrated El Dia de los Tres Reyes Magos, an important community holiday, and put on puppet shows dramatizing Puerto Rican folktales. So it's asking us which choice completes a text that conforms to conventions of standard English. Okay, so we have in all the answers, we can do a trick called vertical scanning, where we look at the differences between the answers. So A has a comma between practice and at the time, C has a comma too, but it also has a comma after at the time, and D has a comma just after at the time, and B has a semicolon. Okay, so in the sentence, if you just read this part, if you're looking at that, it'd be really confusing to solve it, because none of the answers would really work. But if we look at the whole sentence, we can see that they use the semicolon right there too, and they have and right after the semicolon. So that kind of shows us, okay, maybe we're listing stuff. So if we're listing stuff, let's think about it. It says an uncommon practice at the time, semicolon, celebrated El Dia de los Muertos, semicolon, or maybe not semicolon, and then semicolon there, and put on puppet shows dramatizing Puerto Rican folk tales. So it seems here that we're listing out items. We're listing out all the things she does to serve local families during the Great Depression. So right off the bat, I think the answer might be B, because again, even though semicolons rarely separate lists, in this case, because we have a comma here, it makes sense that we might use a semicolon to list items because we don't want to repeat a comma because that's confusing what we're listing. So it could be B. I think the answer is B. But let's go to the other ones. A, practice, comma, at the time. So having a comma at the time would say that this phrase, at the time celebrated El Dia de los whatever, is a non-essential clause. So that means if we cross it out, the sentence should still work. So let's read it. An uncommon practice, an important community holiday. That doesn't make any sense. Just reading it without that. So therefore, A is incorrect because it's not a non-essential clause being separated. C, at the time, that's saying that at the time is a non-essential clause. So an uncommon practice celebrated El Dia de los Muertos, an important community holiday. Again, that's a run-on sentence, right? We have a comma trying to just continue on, but it doesn't make any sense with a comma like that. Similarly, D, again, it does the same thing with saying this is a non-essential clause, which doesn't really work, and it's also a run-on sentence. So D is not the right answer. And therefore the answer is B, because again, semicolons can be used as a comma that's separating items in a list, if there's a comma already in the items. Okay, next. Oh wow, I'm really struggling with this, huh? Okay, here you go. Jamaican British artist Willard Wiggin is known for his remarkable blank, so small that they are best viewed through a microscope. Wiggin's sculptures are made from tiny natural materials such as spider web strands. So by reading the sentence, I can already tell that this part here is so small that they are best viewed through a microscope. Wiggin's sculptures are made from tiny natural materials, or as a independent clause. And even though we have the so small part, so small, right? That part, comma, that they are, or sorry, Wiggin's sculptures are made from tiny materials, so WSR. So this is the subject, this is the verb, and this whole part here is the independent clause. This part is the dependent clause and depends on the part that comes in front of it. So this whole part here is an independent clause, and we know that we separate independent clauses using either a period, semicolon, or a comma plus a fanboy. Okay? So that's how we have to separate the independent clauses. Looking at the answers, A is not separating an independent clause. That's just a run-on sentence. So A is wrong. B is using a comma, which is a comma splice, because again, commas only separate independent clauses if they have conjunction after them, and creations is not a conjunction, therefore it's a comma splice. C uses a period, which is a valid way of separating an independent clause, and D just uses and with no comma, and therefore it's not a valid way of separating two independent clauses, and therefore the answer is C, because again, we need to separate two independent clauses, and the only one that does that properly is C. So in this case, if we didn't know what we had to look for, we didn't know identify the right clauses or whatever, we could just looked at the answer choice and say, okay, this is for dependent clauses, dependent, dependent, independent. So that's the odd one out. Therefore, that's probably the answer. But again, use that trick only if you really have no idea how to solve the problem. And yeah, that's how you solve SAT punctuation questions. Thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Bye.